evening. I'm Haylee Ficuciello, and this is your Englebrook Independent News Federal Crime Report from Washington, D.C. Tonight, federal prosecutors unveiled major cases ranging from violent gun crimes and organized drug trafficking to political violence, cryptocurrency theft, armed robberies, and fraud involving millions in taxpayer-funded federal broadband subsidies. Among the top stories tonight, a California man indicted for allegedly attempting to assassinate President Donald Trump during the White House Correspondent Associate Dinner. 11 defendants charged in what prosecutors describe as a sprawling transnational methamphetamine and GBL trafficking organization stretching from South Korea to Washington, D.C. A convicted felon sentenced after crashing into a residential building while allegedly intoxicated and carrying a loaded handgun, narcotics, and thousands of dollars in cash. A husband convicted of strangling his wife during an argument over laundry detergent, and a federal cryptocurrency conspiracy tied to more than $250 million in stolen digital assets. We begin tonight with one of the most significant federal criminal indictments filed in Washington this year. Federal prosecutors in the District of Columbia have charged 31-year-old Cole Thomas Allen of Torrance, California, in connection with the April 25th shooting during the White House Correspondent Associate Dinner at the Washington Hilton. According to prosecutors, Allen has now been formally indicted for 4 federal charges, including attempted assassination on President Donald J. Trump. The indictment also includes charges of assaulting a federal officer with a deadly weapon, transporting firearms and ammunition across state lines with the intent to commit a felony, and a discharge a firearm during a crime of violence. Federal authorities allege Allen rushed through the Secret Service screening checkpoint shortly after 8:30 p.m. while President Trump was inside the ballroom attending the annual dinner. Investigators say Allen sprinted through the magnet checkpoint before allegedly firing a Mossberg Maverick 88 12-gauge shotgun. A U.S. Secret Service officer was struck in the chest during the attack. Authorities say the wounded officer immediately returned fire, discharging 5 rounds and stopped the suspect before he could reach the ballroom area. Federal investigators say Allen was armed with a 12-gauge shotgun, a Rock Islander Armory 38 caliber pistol, multiple knives and a dagger, ammunition, holster, wire cutters, and a tactical tool. The defendant survived the confrontation and was taken into custody after the scene. Federal officials are portraying the case as a major attempt act of political violence targeting the President of the United States and members of the administration. The FBI says the investigation has been working around the clock on the case since the night of the shooting. Federal prosecutors have also charged a Texas man in connection with a separate shooting involving a Secret Service officer near the Washington Monument. Authorities say 45-year-old Michael Marks of Midland, Texas, was armed when a Secret Service agent encountered him on May 4th near the National Mall. At the same time, Vice President J.D. Vance's motorcade was reportedly passing nearby. According to the court documents, a plainclothes Secret Service agent observed Marks appearing to conceal a handgun near the 15th Street and Madison driveway northwest. Uniformed officers responded as Vice President motorcade moved through the area. Authorities say Marks fled while officers pursued him. Prosecutors allege that then he drew a firearm and fired towards pursuing Secret Service officers while running through the crowded civilian area. A civilian standing behind one of the officers was struck in the leg during the exchange of gunfire. Secret Service officers returned fire, striking Marks multiple times before taking him into custody. Investigators recovered a Sigma Sonor P365 handgun loaded with 9mm ammunition. Authorities say Marks allegedly made anti-government statements while being transported to the hospital, including profanity directed to the White House. Federal charges include assaulting federal officer with dangerous weapon, discharging a firearm during a crime of violence, and an unlawful possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. Federal authorities in Washington have announced what may become one of the largest narcotic conspiracy prosecutions in the district in recent years. 11 men have been charged in a sweeping federal indictment tied to transnational drug trafficking networks stretching from South Korea and California to Washington, D.C., New York, Philadelphia, Baltimore, and South Florida. Federal prosecutors say the organization trafficked high-purity methamphetamine, gamma-butyrin, also known as GBL, cocaine, and other narcotics. Authorities allege that the conspiracy imported industrial quantities of GBL from South Korea while sustainably distributing methamphetamine sourced from California. Investigators say the operation used encrypto communication, shell corporations, commercial partial services, coded language, and money laundering techniques to conceal the network's activities. Federal investigators say JBL, often marked as illegally as liquid ecstasy, is a metabolized in the human body as GHB, a central nervous system depressant associated with overdose deaths and sexual assault crimes. Authorities say traffickers alleged paired GBL with methamphetamine in a dangerous combination known as sex chim. The prosecutors described the mixture as a potentially lethal and highly unpredictable. According to the prosecutors, more than 35 kilograms of methamphetamine were seized during the investigation. Approximately 800 kilograms of GBL were recovered in the United States, and South Korea authorities seized additional 1.5 metric ton of GBL overseas. Federal investigators say the organization was generated enormous profits throughout narcotic trafficking while expanding into the new market of the United States. The indictment alleged that the conspiracy operated with structured hierarchy involving suppliers, distributors, money launderers, and regional coordinators. Several defendants now face mandatory minimum sentence ranging from 10 years to life in prison. 20-year-old Marlon Ferraro, known online as Gotham Ferrari, has been sentenced to more than 6 years in federal prison for his role in a sprawling cryptocurrency theft enterprise. Federal prosecutors say the conspiracy stole more than $250 million in cryptocurrency from victims across the United States. According to the prosecutors, Ferraro served the organizer as a burglar of last resort. Authorities say when victims refused to surrender access to the digital wallet online, members of the enterprise allegedly dispatched Ferraro to physically break into the homes and steal hardware cryptocurrency wallets. Federal court documents describe residential burglaries, social engineering scams, money laundering, fraudulent identification documents, and a lavish spending fueled by stolen digital assets. Investigators say members of the conspiracy spent stolen funds on exotic cars, luxury watches, designer handbags, private jet travel, nightclub service costing up to $500,000 per night, and a multi-million dollar rental properties. Ferraris was sentenced to 78 months in prison and was ordered to pay $2.5 million in restitution. Authorities say he was arrested while allegedly possessing a firearm and fake identification documents. In another case, a previously convicted felon has been sentenced to 30 months in federal prison after authorities say he crashed into a residential building while intoxicated and carrying a loaded firearm, narcotics intended for distribution. Federal prosecutors say 35-year-old Curtis Nathaniel Suber was speeding through Northwest Washington shortly after midnight in October of 2025 when officers observed his vehicle. Police later found the vehicle crashed into an apartment building. According to investigators, smoke was rising from the vehicle, air packs were deployed, and Suber allegedly exited the vehicle holding a half-empty bottle of Hennessy. Officers recovered a loaded Glock 45 caliber handgun with 23 rounds, marijuana, mushrooms, oxycodone, ecstasy, digital scale, and approximately $4,200 in cash. Authorities say Silver also tested positive for cocaine, amphetamines, and fentanyl. Federal prosecutors argued for a 46-month sentence. The court imposed a 30-month prison term followed by 3 years of supervised release. A Washington, D.C. man was found guilty for strangling his wife during what prosecutors say began as an argument over laundry detergent. 42-year-old Johnny Gregory was convicted by the Superior Court jury on one count of strangulation. Prosecutors say the January 2026 assault escalated rapidly. According to the government evidence, Gregory allegedly pushed his wife to the ground, punched her repeatedly, placed his knee on her chest, and strangled her with both hands. Authorities say the victim lost conscience and urinated herself during the attack. The victim's 15-year-old daughter was reportedly present during the assault. The victim survived and was transported to the hospital for treatment. Sentencing is scheduled for July 31st of 2026. Federal prosecutors say a previously convicted felon has pled guilty in connection with a series of armed robberies targeting restaurants throughout Washington, D.C. 32-year-old David Andrew Williams admitted responsibility for robberies involving Subway, Manny's Olga Pizzeria, Chipotle, and Dunkin' Donuts locations. According to prosecutors, William repeatedly entered businesses armed with handguns and demanded cash from employees. In one robbery, investigators say he poured coins from a cash register into a Subway cookie bag before fleeing. Authorities eventually arrested Williams aboard the Metro train. Police recovered what prosecutors described as a ghost gun loaded with ammunition. William now faces sentencing in September. Federal and local law prosecutors say a violent robbery crew responsible for targeting luxury watches in Northwest Washington have now been sentenced. 22-year-old Daryl James received 15 years in prison sentence for his role in a robbery spree that terrorized nightlife districts during the summer of 2024. Investigators say mass robberies use stolen vehicles, approaching victims before jumping out at gunpoint, stealing luxury watches and other valuables. Authorities link the crew to at least 8 armed robberies. Federal prosecutors say the crime spree accumulated in the high-speed chase throughout Washington, D.C., involving stolen vehicles and discarded firearms. A former Walgreens manager has been sentenced for participating in a series of armed inside job robberies targeting Chinatown Walgreens where she worked. Federal prosecutors say 22-year-old London Teeter conspired with co-conspirators to stage robberies nearly once a month over a 7-month period. Authorities say Teeter used her knowledge of the store manager to coordinate the timing of the cash transfer and security vulnerabilities. Prosecutors say armed robbers entered the store while Teeter and or other co-conspirators are working, forcing employees into management offices and stealing cash. Authorities say Teeter later criticized surveillance footage from one robbery in a text message, allegedly writing, "The video looks so bad." Teeter received 32 months in federal prison. Her co-conspirator received sentence ranging from more than 10 years to 16 years behind bars. A Maryland man has been convicted in the 2024 fatal shooting of Kenneth Goins following a fighting inside the Northwest Washington bar. Prosecutors say Robert Lowe struck the victim with a bottle before a physical altercation escalated. Authorities say Lowe then shot the victim during the fight. Police pursued motorcycle fleeing in the area, but initially lost the suspect. Lowe now faces up to 33 years in prison. A Maryland man has also been convicted in a connection with a deadly 2022 crash that occurred while fleeing a Secret Service officer near the White House. Authorities say 38-year-old Spiro Filantos sped away during a traffic stop before running a red light and colliding with another vehicle. The crash killed pedestrian Shu Si and seriously injured another victim. Federal prosecutors say Sufti fled after officers attempted to investigate traffic violations and apparent open alcohol container inside the vehicle. Sentencing is scheduled for June 25th. And in one of the most largest federal civil fraud recoveries announced this month, Dish Wireless LLC has agreed to pay more than $17 million to resolve allegations involving federal broadband subsidy programs created during the COVID-19 pandemic. Federal investigators allege Dish improperly enrolled thousands of ineligible households in the Emergency Broadband Benefit Program and in the Affordable Connectivity Program. Authorities say the company continued seeking federal reimbursement after executives allegedly became aware of the enrollment fraud connection. Federal prosecutors allege falsified applications were submitted, third-party agents were improperly supervised, and inaccurate school eligibility information used to obtain taxpayer-funded benefits. The settlement resolves allegation under the False Claim Act and related federal status. Federal prosecutors in Washington continue to pursue increasingly wide-range cases involving violent crimes, narcotic trafficking, cyber-enabled threats, fraud, firearm offenses, and attack targeting federal officials. As the investigations move through the courts, Englebrook Independent News will continue to monitor across the nation's capital and bringing you verified fact-based reporting. For continued coverage of federal crimes, national security, and major criminal investigations, stay with Englebrook Independent News. I'm Haylee Ficuciello. Good night.